Have you ever felt trapped in your own home? At 68, Eleanor never imagined starting over until a storm brought an unexpected savior to her doorstep. This powerful story shows it's never too late to find your strength. I won't spoil the ending, but prepare for an emotional journey of courage and transformation. New here? Hit subscribe and the notification bell. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now, let's meet Eleanor and the German Shepherd who changed everything. Eleanor Winters stood at her kitchen window, watching snowflakes drift lazily onto her meticulously maintained garden. At 68, her hands bore the telltale marks of a lifetime spent with needle and thread, slight calluses on her fingertips and a permanent indent on her right middle finger where countless thimbles had rested. The winter light caught on her silver hair, styled in a practical bob that framed a face lined more by laughter than sorrow, at least until recently. The doorbell rang, shattering the peaceful silence of her modest two-bedroom home in Mapleton, a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other's business and Sunday potlucks were practically mandatory. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and moved toward the door with the unhurried pace of someone who had all the time in the world. "Coming," she called, her voice still strong despite her years. When she opened the door, the sight before her made her heart sink and soar simultaneously. Jackson, her only son, stood on her porch with two battered suitcases and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Mom," he said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid Midwestern air. Surprise. Eleanor's hand fluttered to her throat. "Jackson, what are you? I thought you were in Chicago." "Things didn't work out," he replied, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Mind if I come in? It's freezing out here." She stepped aside, noting the expensive watch on his wrist that contrasted sharply with his worn-out coat. As he brushed past her, she caught the faint scent of alcohol and cigarettes. "What happened to your apartment? Your job at the investment firm?" she asked, following him into the living room where hand-stitched quilts draped over every piece of furniture, each telling a story of birthdays, weddings, and anniversaries long past. Jackson dropped his bags on her polished hardwood floor. "It's complicated, Mom. Market's been tough. Downsizing hit my department hard." He avoided her eyes, running a hand through his dark hair, now flecked with premature gray at the temples. "You've been gambling again, haven't you?" Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. His face hardened. "Jesus, Mom. I just got here. Can we not do this right now? Last time, you promised it was over. You swore to me after I paid off your debts that it was a rough patch." Jackson snapped, his handsome features contorting. "Everyone has them. I just need a place to stay until I get back on my feet. A month, tops." Eleanor sank into her favorite armchair, suddenly feeling every one of her 68 years. "Of course you can stay," she said softly. What else could she say? This was her son, her only child. "Thanks." His smile returned, charming and disarming as always. "I knew I could count on you." As Eleanor prepared the guest room that evening, she wondered what the ladies at the Mapleton Crochet Circle would say. They'd cluck their tongues sympathetically while secretly relishing the gossip. In this town, family troubles were both deeply private and public property. "Just temporary," she murmured to herself, smoothing the quilt she'd made when Jackson graduated college. Before the gambling, before the failed marriage, before the string of jobs he couldn't keep. She didn't know then that temporary would stretch into weeks, then months, or that each passing day would chip away at her carefully constructed peace, leaving her trapped in her own home with a stranger wearing her beloved son's face. 3 weeks after Jackson's arrival, Eleanor's home no longer felt like her own. The evidence was everywhere. Empty beer bottles clustered on the coffee table, dirty laundry spilling from the guest room, and a persistent tension that hung in the air like smoke. On this particular Tuesday morning, Eleanor stood at the stove preparing breakfast when Jackson stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and unshaven. His once athletic frame had grown softer, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Morning," Eleanor said brightly, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon toward him. "I made your favorite." Jackson grunted in response, immediately reaching for his phone to check something that made his jaw tighten. He muttered a curse under his breath. "Everything all right?" Eleanor asked, pouring him coffee in the mug she'd kept since his high school baseball days. "Fine," he snapped, then caught himself. "Sorry. Just, job hunting is brutal these days." Eleanor nodded sympathetically. Margaret's son works at that new tech company by the interstate. I could ask if they're God. Mom, I don't need you networking for me like I'm some teenager. Jackson interrupted, his voice rising. I have an MBA, remember? I'm not looking for entry-level handouts. I was only trying to help, Eleanor said quietly, turning back to the stove. The refrigerator door slammed as Jackson grabbed orange juice. I don't need your help. What I need is for everyone to get off my back. He drank straight from the carton, something that would have earned him a scolding when he was younger. Now, Eleanor said nothing. After breakfast, Eleanor retreated to her sewing room, the one space Jackson rarely entered. She ran her fingers over a half-finished quilt, tracing the intricate pattern she'd designed herself. For decades, her quilts had been sought after throughout Mapleton and beyond. Her little shop, Winter's Warmth, had been her pride and joy until arthritis forced her into semi-retirement 2 years ago. The phone rang, startling her from her reverie. Eleanor? It's Diane. We missed you at Circle yesterday. Diane had been her friend since they were girls, their lives intertwined through marriages, births, and now widowhood. Oh, I'm sorry, Eleanor replied, lowering her voice instinctively. Jackson wasn't feeling well, and I thought I should stay home. The pause on the other end spoke volumes. Eleanor, this is the third meeting you've missed. Is everything okay with Jackson being back? Of course. It's wonderful having him home. The lie came easily now, practiced over weeks of similar conversations. Well, we're all dying to see him. Why don't you both come to the Winter Festival this weekend? The whole town will be there. Eleanor glanced at the bruise forming on her wrist where Jackson had grabbed her last night when she'd mentioned his empty job applications. We'll try, she said. After hanging up, Eleanor heard a crash from the living room, followed by a string of expletives. She hurried out to find Jackson standing over the shattered remains of a porcelain figurine, a wedding gift from her late husband's mother. Jackson, that was an heirloom. It was in my way, he retorted, kicking the pieces aside. This place is cluttered with all this old junk anyway. His eyes were red-rimmed, his movements erratic. Have you been drinking already? It's not even noon. Eleanor began carefully picking up the broken pieces. Jackson loomed over her. Are you counting my drinks now? Keeping tabs? Maybe making little notes for your gossip circle? No, you just what, Mom? Want to control me? Fix me? Make me into your perfect little boy again. His voice rose with each question until he was shouting. Eleanor flinched. That's not true, isn't it? You've always thought you knew what was best for me. Well, look how that turned out. Dad pushed me into business when I wanted to study art, and you just stood by and let him. Your father wanted what was best. My father wanted a son he could brag about. Jackson kicked the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. And now I'm back in this miserable town, in this suffocating house, with nothing to show for it. Eleanor tried to touch his arm, but he jerked away. Maybe you should rest, dear. We can talk later when you're feeling more yourself. This is myself, Mom. This is who I am now. Sorry to disappoint you. With that, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard that another figurine toppled from its shelf. Eleanor sank onto the sofa, hands trembling as she clutched the broken pieces of porcelain. Outside the window, the January snow fell heavier now, blanketing Mapleton in pristine white that belied the darkness growing within her home. She wondered how long she could keep up the facade before the cracks began to show to the outside world. How long before someone noticed that her careful excuses were just that, excuses to hide a truth too painful to admit. February arrived with a vengeance, bringing record-breaking cold to Mapleton. The thermometer outside Eleanor's kitchen window read -15 degrees as she stood washing breakfast dishes, her movements deliberate and slow to avoid aggravating the bruise blossoming on her shoulder. A souvenir from yesterday's argument when Jackson discovered she'd hidden her checkbook. Your pension barely covers groceries with the way you eat, he'd shouted, tossing kitchen cabinets open and closed. We need that money for investment opportunities. I can double it in a week. Eleanor had stood her ground, one of her increasingly rare moments of defiance. The last 3 opportunities emptied my savings account. There's nothing left to invest, Jackson. His face had twisted into something unrecognizable as he grabbed her shoulders and shook her. You don't believe in me. My own mother. The memory made her hands tremble as she dried a coffee mug. Outside, the wind howled, promising another day where leaving the house would be nearly impossible. Another day trapped with a son she no longer recognized. The doorbell rang, an unexpected sound in such weather. Eleanor hurried to answer it, secretly hoping for any distraction from the oppressive silence of the house since Jackson had left angrily hours ago. On her porch stood Marilyn Cooper, a neighbor from down the street. "Eleanor, thank God you're home. I didn't know who else to call." Eleanor pulled her sweater tighter. "Marilyn, what's wrong?" "There's a dog. I found him half frozen behind the dumpsters at Taylor's Market. My husband's allergic, and the shelter's closed because of the storm." Marilyn pointed to her idling car where Eleanor could make out a large, dark shape in the back seat. 20 minutes later, Eleanor had a trembling, matted German shepherd huddled in her bathroom. The dog's ribs showed clearly through his dirty coat, and a jagged scar ran across his muzzle. His eyes, though amber and intelligent, followed her every move without aggression, only wariness. "Well," she said softly, offering him a bowl of warm water. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" The dog didn't approach until she backed away, then drank desperately. "No collar," Eleanor murmured. "Let's call you Max for now. Max seems like a good, strong name." She spent the afternoon gently cleaning him with warm washcloths, discovering more scars beneath his matted fur. When she tried touching his left hind leg, he whimpered but didn't snap. "Someone hurt you," she whispered. "But you're not dangerous, are you? Just afraid." As if understanding, Max lowered his head and allowed her to continue. By evening, she'd managed to feed him some chicken and rice, and he lay on an old blanket in the corner of her sewing room, watching her quilt with those attentive amber eyes. "This can only be temporary," she told Max, surprising herself with how natural it felt to talk to him. "Jackson doesn't like animals. He's going through a difficult time right now, you see. He wasn't always like this." Max's ears perked up at the catch in her voice. "He was such a gentle boy," Eleanor continued, her needle moving rhythmically through fabric. "Always rescuing injured birds and befriending the neighborhood strays. I don't know when that changed. After his father died, perhaps, or when the gambling started." The front door slammed, making both Eleanor and Max jolt upright. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by Jackson's off-key whistling, a sure sign he'd been drinking. "Mom, you won't believe the streak I had tonight." His voice boomed through the house. Eleanor quickly closed the sewing room door, her heart racing. "I'm in here, Jackson. I'll be right out. Tony finally let me in on that poker game at the Eagles Lodge," Jackson was saying as she entered the living room. $300. That's just the beginning. Next week." "That's wonderful, dear," Eleanor interrupted, trying to position herself to block the hallway. "Have you eaten? I can warm up some stew." Jackson squinted at her. "What are you hiding? You've got that look." "Look? I don't know what you—" A deep bark from the sewing room cut her off. Jackson's expression darkened instantly. What the hell was that? He pushed past her, nearly knocking her into the wall. "Jackson, please. It's just temporarily." He flung open the sewing room door to find Max standing alert, hackles raised but not growling. The two stared at each other for a long moment before Jackson rounded on Eleanor. "A dog? Are you kidding me? In my house." "Your house." The words slipped out before Eleanor could stop them. Jackson stepped toward her, jaw clenched. "I grew up here. Dad built this place. And now you're bringing in strays without even asking me." "He was freezing to death," Eleanor said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Marilyn found him. It's just until the shelter opens. Get it out. Tonight. It's below zero and the roads are—" "I said get it out." Jackson's fist slammed into the wall beside her head. The reaction was immediate. Max lunged forward with a deep, warning growl, positioning himself between Eleanor and her son. Though he didn't touch Jackson, the message was clear in his stance and bared teeth. Jackson stumbled backward, momentarily startled out of his rage. "That thing's vicious. It nearly attacked me. He's protecting me," Eleanor said softly, a realization dawning that sent equal parts fear and hope through her. "He thinks you're threatening me." Something uncomfortable flickered across Jackson's face. Shame, perhaps, or recognition. It vanished quickly. "Whatever. Keep the mud if you want. But keep it away from me." He stormed out, leaving Eleanor standing in the doorway, one hand unconsciously reaching down to rest on Max's head. For the first time in months, she felt something other than fear as she listened to Jackson's bedroom door slam. She looked down at Max, who had relaxed his stance but remained vigilant at her side. "Thank you," she whispered, and could have sworn the dog nodded in understanding. By early March, patches of frozen ground had begun to emerge from beneath the snow in Mapleton. Eleanor's morning routine now included an early walk with Max, whose transformation over the past month had been remarkable. His coat gleamed with health, his frame had filled out, and the perpetual wariness in his amber eyes had softened, at least when they were alone. This morning, they followed their usual route through Lakeside Park, where the frozen surface of Mapleton Lake glittered in the pale sunrise. Eleanor had wrapped a hand-knitted scarf around her neck to hide the fading yellowish bruise there, a result of Jackson grabbing her when she'd refused to sign over her car to him last week. "Morning, Eleanor," called Harriet Finch, a retired librarian who power-walked every day regardless of weather. "That dog of yours is looking handsome." Eleanor waved, keeping her distance. Close interactions meant questions she couldn't answer. "Have a good day, Harriet." As they turned toward home, Eleanor sighed. "I used to stop and chat with everyone, Max. Now I'm afraid they'll notice something's wrong." Max looked up at her, his intelligent gaze seeming to understand more than any animal should. "The crochet circle meets today. I should go. I've missed too many." She paused, considering. "But Jackson's been in such a mood since losing at cards yesterday. If I leave..." Max nudged her hand with his nose, as if encouraging her. When they arrived home, Eleanor was relieved to find the house still quiet. She fed Max in the kitchen, then prepared a simple breakfast for herself and Jackson. As she set the table, she heard the shower running upstairs, a good sign. Jackson was at least making an effort today. He appeared 20 minutes later, clean-shaven and dressed in his one remaining business suit. "You look nice," Eleanor ventured, sliding a plate of eggs toward him. "Do you have an interview?" Jackson nodded, his expression tightly controlled. "Accounting firm downtown. Nothing fancy, but it'll do until something better comes along." Hope fluttered in Eleanor's chest. "That's wonderful. When is it?" 11. "I'll need to borrow your car." "Of course." She hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking of attending the crochet circle at noon. It's just 2 hours at Diane's house. I could drop you off and pick you up afterward." Jackson's fork paused midway to his mouth. "The Hens Convention, huh? What exactly do you tell them about our situation here?" Eleanor tensed. "Nothing. They're my friends, Jackson. Friends who'd have plenty to say if they knew their perfect Eleanor was enabling her failure of a son." His tone had that dangerous edge she'd come to recognize. "I don't talk about you that way. I would never. Save it." He stood abruptly. "Take the car. I'll reschedule." "No, please. Your interview is more important. I'll stay home." Max entered the kitchen, immediately sensing the tension. He positioned himself subtly closer to Eleanor. Jackson eyed the dog with contempt. "Still have your bodyguard, I see." "He's just protective by nature," Eleanor said softly. "Some dogs are like that." "Yeah, well, he'd better stay out of my way. I saw him growling at me yesterday when I was just talking to you. We were arguing about the credit card bill, Jackson. You were shouting." Jackson's face flushed with anger. "So it's my fault the dog thinks I'm some kind of monster? Maybe you've been training him to hate me." "That's not true, isn't it? Ever since that mutt showed up, you've been different. Defiant. Like you're not afraid of me anymore." He stepped closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Is that it, Mom? Were you afraid of me before?" Eleanor's hands trembled as she gathered empty dishes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." Jackson moved suddenly, grabbing her wrist and twisting until she gasped in pain. The reaction was instantaneous. Max's deep growl rumbled through the kitchen as he thrust himself between them, teeth bared and hackles raised. Unlike previous confrontations, this time he didn't just stand his ground. He advanced, forcing Jackson to back against the counter. "Call him off," Jackson shouted, genuine fear in his voice. "Max, enough," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. The dog immediately settled, though he remained positioned protectively. Jackson pointed a trembling finger at her. "That thing is dangerous. Either it goes, or I call animal control and tell them it attacked me." "He didn't attack you, Jackson. He's never touched you." "Not yet." Jackson grabbed his coat. "I'm taking the car. Don't wait up." After the front door slammed, Eleanor sank into a chair, massaging her wrist. Max came to her side, resting his head on her knee with a soft whine. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, stroking his ears. "You did the right thing." She glanced at the clock, still enough time to make it to Diane's. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt a flicker of determination. She reached for the phone and called for a taxi. The Mapleton Crochet Circle had met every Tuesday for over 30 years, rotating between members' homes. Today, 8 women gathered in Diane Wilson's sunroom, surrounded by yarn in every color imaginable. Eleanor had been a founding member, known for her exquisite stitchwork. "Eleanor," Diane exclaimed when she arrived. "We were just saying we might need to send a search party if you missed today too." The women laughed, making room for her in the circle. Eleanor forced a smile, carefully arranging her sleeves to hide her wrist. "Sorry I've been absent. Jackson's job search has been keeping us both busy." Martha Jenkins, the town's former high school principal, gave her a penetrating look. "How is Jackson adapting to small-town life again? Must be quite an adjustment after Chicago." "He's managing," Eleanor replied, focusing intently on the crochet hook in her hands. "I saw him at Donovan's bar last night," commented Ruth Green. "Seemed to be celebrating something." Eleanor's heart sank. The money for his interview suit, gone. "Eleanor," Diane said gently, "you've been holding that hook for 5 minutes without making a stitch. And you're wearing a scarf indoors. Are you feeling well?" 8 pairs of concerned eyes fixed on her. Eleanor felt tears threatening. "I'm fine," she insisted. "Just a bit tired." As the conversation shifted to the upcoming spring festival, Eleanor noticed Judith Morgan, a retired attorney and the newest member of the circle, watching her with uncommon intensity. When the meeting ended, Judith approached her quietly. "Eleanor, would you like a ride home? I'm heading that direction." In Judith's car, the silence stretched uncomfortably until the older woman spoke. "I recognize the signs, you know. I worked with domestic abuse victims for 20 years before retiring." Eleanor stared out the window. "I don't know what you mean." "The canceled plans. The excuses. The covered bruises." Judith's voice was gentle but firm. "You don't have to say anything. But if you ever need help, I'm in the blue house on Willow Street." As they pulled up to Eleanor's home, she noticed Jackson's car was gone. A small mercy. "Thank you for the ride," she managed, her voice thick. "One more thing," Judith added. "That German shepherd of yours, there's something special about him, isn't there?" Eleanor paused, hand on the door handle. "How did you know about Max?" "Small town," Judith smiled. "Plus, I volunteer at the animal shelter sometimes. Military-trained dogs have a certain bearing. I'd recognize it anywhere." As Eleanor entered her empty house, Max greeted her with obvious relief. She knelt, hugging him tightly as tears finally broke free. "Who were you before, Max?" she whispered against his fur. "And what are we going to do now?" April brought rain showers and the first green buds to Mapleton, washing away the last vestiges of winter. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, sipping tea and watching Max explore the backyard, his nose following invisible trails through the emerging grass. At her feet rested a small suitcase, packed with essentials, just in case. The past month had been a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and appeasement. Jackson's mood swung wildly between charming contrition and explosive rage, with increasingly shorter periods of the former. Eleanor had taken to sleeping with her bedroom door locked, Max a constant guardian at her bedside. The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "Eleanor? It's Mayor Wilson," came the crisp voice of Diane's husband. "How are you?" "Fine, Robert. Just fine." The automatic response felt hollow on her tongue. "Glad to hear it. Listen, the reason I'm calling, the town council was discussing the spring festival, and we remembered your quilting shop has been closed for some time now." Eleanor sighed. "My arthritis makes it difficult." "That's just it," Robert continued enthusiastically. "We think it's time Winter's Warmth reopened. The tourism committee believes your quilts could be a real draw for the festival this year. The old Hendricks space on Main Street is available, smaller than your previous location, but perfect for a part-time operation." Eleanor's heart quickened. The shop had been her sanctuary before arthritis and widowhood had conspired to close it. A place that was hers alone. "I don't know, Robert. Just think about it. The town would help with setup. It would be wonderful to see those beautiful quilts available again." After hanging up, Eleanor gazed around her kitchen. The faded wallpaper she'd chosen 30 years ago, the worn countertops, the table where her family had shared thousands of meals. Now, it felt like a beautiful cage. The front door slammed, and Max immediately appeared at her side, alert and watchful. "Mom," Jackson called, his voice unusually cheerful. "You home?" Eleanor steeled herself. In the kitchen, he entered with a bounce in his step, cleanly dressed in clothes she'd washed yesterday. "Guess who's got good news? You got the job?" Hope flickered despite her wariness. "Better. I ran into Tony at the diner. He's got a line on this amazing investment opportunity, totally legitimate. Real estate development in Columbus. We just need to get in early with about 5,000, and we could triple it in 6 months." Eleanor's stomach clenched. "Jackson, we've discussed this. I don't have that kind of money anymore." His smile dimmed slightly. "Come on, Mom. You must have something tucked away. What about your retirement account?" "It's gone, Jackson. The credit card bills, the loan for your car that got repossessed. It's all gone except for my monthly pension." His expression hardened. "What about the house? We could take out a small equity loan. The house is paid off. Your father made sure of that." She took a deep breath. "Actually, I've been offered an opportunity myself. The mayor thinks I should reopen my quilting shop for the spring festival." Jackson scoffed. "Your little hobby shop? What's that going to bring in? A couple hundred a month?" "It would be mine," Eleanor said, a quiet determination in her voice. "And I'm going to do it." The shift in Jackson's demeanor was instant. His face flushed as he stepped toward her. "Without discussing it with me? I'm trying to get us out of this financial hole, and you're playing shopkeeper?" Max moved forward, a low rumble in his chest. Jackson paused, eyeing the dog warily before continuing in a lower voice. "We're family, Mom. We're supposed to support each other. I need this investment opportunity, and I need something that's mine again." Eleanor straightened, drawing strength from Max's presence. "I've already called Robert back. I'm taking the shop space." Jackson's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You've changed. That damn dog has made you think you don't need me. This isn't about Max or you. It's about me finding my way again." For a moment, something like genuine hurt flashed across Jackson's face. Then it vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Fine, do your little shop. But don't come crying to me when your arthritis flares up and you can't even thread a needle." He stormed out, and moments later, Eleanor heard the car start. She exhaled slowly, trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline and an unfamiliar emotion, pride. "Well, Max," she said, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "Looks like we're going back into business." The following Saturday, Eleanor stood in the small storefront on Main Street, surrounded by boxes of fabric, thread, and carefully preserved quilts from her home collection. Mayor Wilson had been true to his word. Several town council members had helped transport her supplies and set up displays. The simple space had large windows that flooded the room with morning light, illuminating the vibrant colors of her craftwork. "This is perfect," she told Judith Morgan, who had appeared that morning offering assistance. "I'd forgotten how much I missed this." Judith smiled, arranging a blue and white star pattern quilt on a vintage rack. "Sometimes we forget who we are until someone reminds us." "Or something," Eleanor added, watching Max explore the shop, sniffing each corner thoroughly. "The mayor was surprisingly accommodating about allowing Max to stay here with me. I might have mentioned to Robert that Max is being trained as a service dog," Judith admitted with a wink. "Which isn't entirely untrue. He serves you very well." Eleanor gave her a questioning look. "You've gone to a lot of trouble for me, Judith." "What?" The older woman's expression grew serious. "Let's just say I recognize a familiar situation. My sister lived with her abusive son for 12 years before she found the courage to change things. I was too busy with my career to see the signs until it was almost too late." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson isn't. He wouldn't." The denials felt hollow even to her own ears. "Eleanor," Judith said gently, "you don't have to explain or defend anything to me. But I want you to know you have options. And friends." A knock at the door interrupted them. Diane Wilson stood outside with several other members of the crochet circle, all carrying covered dishes. "We thought the reopening deserved a proper celebration," Diane announced as they filed in. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt the knot in her chest loosen slightly. As her friends admired the shop and fussed over Max, she realized that her world hadn't shrunk to just her house and Jackson's moods. There was still a community here, people who cared. "Eleanor, these new quilt designs are exquisite," Martha Jenkins exclaimed, examining an autumn-themed wall hanging. "You must have been working on these all winter." "My therapy," Eleanor replied softly. "When things get difficult, I sew." By afternoon, Word had spread through town about the reopening of winter's warmth. Customers began to trickle in. Old clients delighted to see her back in business, tourists charmed by the authenticity of her handmade creations, and locals who came as much for gossip as for quilting. To Eleanor's surprise, Max proved to be an unexpected draw. He greeted each visitor politely from his bed near the counter, his dignified bearing and attentive eyes enchanting children and adults alike. "What a magnificent dog," commented an elderly gentleman examining a fishing-themed quilt. "German Shepherd, isn't he? Reminds me of the K-9 units I worked with in the service." As the day wound down and her friends departed, Eleanor sat at the small antique desk that served as her checkout counter, Max at her feet. For the first time in months, she'd gone a full day without fear, without walking on eggshells, without hiding bruises. "We did it, Max," she whispered, reaching down to stroke his head. "This is just the beginning." Outside, dusk was falling over Mapleton, painting Main Street in soft shadows. Eleanor didn't notice the figure watching the shop from across the street. Jackson, his face twisted with resentment as he observed his mother's small moment of triumph, already calculating how to turn it to his advantage. May arrived with an explosion of color across Mapleton, tulips lining the town square, flowering trees casting delicate petals like snow, and gardens bursting into bloom after months of dormancy. Eleanor's shop had been open for 3 weeks, developing a steady rhythm of customers and classes. Tuesday and Thursday mornings were reserved for quilt basics, Saturday afternoons for advanced techniques, and the first Sunday of each month for the newly formed Stitch and Support group. Judith's idea, ostensibly for crafters facing challenges from arthritis, but quietly serving as a haven for women in difficult domestic situations. Eleanor stood arranging a window display, her fingers more nimble than they had been in years. Regular work had strengthened her hands, and the joy she found in creation seemed to temporarily subdue the pain of arthritis. Max lay nearby on his custom bed, a quilt specially designed in browns and golds to complement his coat, now embroidered with his name and adorned with a small American flag, a nod to what Judith suspected was his military background. The bell above the door chimed. Eleanor turned with a welcoming smile that faltered when she saw Jackson enter, looking uncharacteristically sober and well-groomed. "Surprise," he said, holding a small potted plant. "Housewarming gift. Or shop-warming, I guess." Max immediately rose to his feet, but didn't growl, just watched with intense focus. "Jackson," Eleanor said carefully, "this is unexpected." He set the plan on the counter. "Can a son visit his mother's new business? I've been hearing about it all over town." His tone was light, but something cold lurked beneath. "Of course. Would you like a tour?" Eleanor offered, maintaining distance between them. Jackson wandered the small space, examining quilts with forced interest. "Quite the operation you've got here. The old ladies of Mapleton must be thrilled." "Business has been good," Eleanor replied. "I've had orders from as far as Indianapolis." He picked up a price tag, eyebrows rising. $300 for a wall hanging? People actually pay this. Hand quilting is valued by those who understand the craft. Jackson nodded, continuing his circuit of the shop until he reached the counter. His eyes fell on the open ledger book where Eleanor recorded sales and expenses. Well, he said, voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "Looks like Mom's little hobby is bringing in real money." Eleanor closed the book. "It's enough to cover expenses and give me some independence." "Independence," Jackson repeated, testing the word. "Interesting choice. Almost sounds like you don't want your son around anymore." "That's not what I said, but it's what you meant." He leaned across the counter. "You know what's funny? While you've been playing shopkeeper, I've been dealing with our actual financial problems. The property tax bill came yesterday, nearly $4,000 due next month." Eleanor frowned. "That can't be right. I've always paid the taxes through my bank account. It's automatic." "Well, there's been an assessment adjustment. Something about improved property values in the neighborhood." He produced an official-looking envelope from his jacket pocket. "See for yourself." Eleanor examined the document, her stomach sinking. It appeared legitimate, though the amount seemed suspiciously high. "I'll have to call the assessor's office." "Already tried. Some special reassessment program." Jackson shrugged. "Bottom line, we need to come up with the money. I can use some of the shop proceeds, but it won't be enough." Eleanor's mind raced through options. Perhaps a payment plan. Or, Jackson interrupted, we could use that investment opportunity one told you about. The buy-in is still available, but not for long. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. There is no tax reassessment, is there? Jackson's expression hardened. You calling me a liar? I'm saying I'll verify this directly with the county office. Eleanor stood straighter, bolstered by the familiar surroundings of her shop and Max's steady presence beside her. Jackson, I can't keep doing this. The manipulation, the anger, the control. Control? He laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. You've been controlling me my whole life. What to study, who to marry, how to live. Now you've got this much trained to attack me if I so much as raise my voice. Max has never attacked you. He protects me when I'm frightened. And why would my own mother be frightened of me? Jackson's voice rose. What exactly have you been telling your new best friend Judith and your crochet hags about me? A customer entering the shop paused at the threshold, eyes widening at Jackson's tone. I'll come back later, the woman murmured, retreating quickly. Jackson gestured toward the departing customer. See what you've done? Embarrass me in public now. You're embarrassing yourself, Eleanor said quietly. Please leave, Jackson. We can discuss this at home. Oh, I'm going, he snapped, moving toward the door. But this conversation isn't over. And you might want to check on your precious shop tonight. Never know what might happen to a place like this after dark in a town with such inadequate police coverage. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the bell. Through the window, Eleanor watched him storm down Main Street, shouldering past a startled pedestrian without apology. When he was out of sight, her legs finally gave way. She sank onto her stool, hand pressed against her racing heart. Max whined softly, resting his chin on her knee. Eleanor stroked his head mechanically, mind whirling with fear and, underneath it, a slow-burning anger. He's escalating, Max, she whispered. I don't know what he might do next. The shop phone rang, making her jump. She answered with a trembling winter's warmth. Eleanor? It's Judith. Are you all right? Martha just called me saying she tried to come into your shop, but Jackson was there making a scene. Eleanor closed her eyes. News travels fast. In Mapleton? At the speed of light. Judith paused. What happened? As Eleanor recounted the confrontation, she found her voice growing stronger. Speaking the truth aloud somehow diminished its power to terrify her. He threatened the shop, she concluded. Not directly, but the implication was clear. I'm coming over, Judith declared, and I'm bringing something that might help. An hour later, Eleanor watched as Judith's son-in-law, a local contractor, installed a simple security system, motion-activated lights, door and window sensors, and a small camera above the register. It connects to your phone, he explained, showing Eleanor the app. Any movement after hours, you'll get an alert. And it records to the cloud, so even if the camera is damaged, the footage is safe. Thank you, Brian, Eleanor said. What do I owe you for this? He shook his head. Consider it a belated welcome back to business gift. Mom-in-law says your quilting classes saved her from going stir-crazy after retirement. After Brian left, Judith stayed, helping Eleanor reorganize a shipment of fabrics. You're not going home tonight, are you? She asked without looking up from folding a bolt of calico. Eleanor hesitated. I have to eventually. No, you don't. Judith's tone brooked no argument. My guest room is always ready. You and Max are staying with me tonight. Jackson would see that as a declaration of war. And what would you call his behavior today? A peace offering. Judith abandoned the fabric to face Eleanor directly. Listen to me. This pattern only escalates. Trust me, I've seen it hundreds of times professionally and once very personally. Before Eleanor could respond, the shop door opened again. Mayor Wilson entered, his usual jovial expression replaced by concern. Eleanor, I just heard about Jackson's outburst, he said without preamble. Are you all right? Eleanor managed a wan smile. News really does travel fast around here. Small towns, Robert shrugged. No secrets. But seriously, if you need anything, she needs the police to do a few extra drive-bys of the shop tonight, Judith interjected. Jackson made some veiled threats. The mayor's expression darkened. Consider it done. Chief Donovan owes me a favor. He turned to Eleanor. We take care of our own in Mapleton. Always have. After he left, Eleanor felt tears threatening. I never wanted everyone to know my personal business. Sometimes, Judith said gently, letting others help is the bravest thing you can do. That night, From the safety of Judith's guest room, Eleanor watched through the security app as patrol cars drove slowly past her darkened shop every hour. Max lay beside her on the unfamiliar bed, a warm, solid presence against her anxiety. She stroked his fur, drawing comfort from his steady breathing. "What are we going to do, Max? I can't hide forever, but I can't go back to the way things were either." Max lifted his head, meeting her gaze with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand every word. In them, Eleanor saw not just protection, but something she had nearly forgotten, her own reflection, clear and undistorted by fear. The Mapleton Spring Festival transformed the town square into a kaleidoscope of colorful tints, local vendors, and festive decorations. Now in its 47th year, the weekend-long celebration marked the official start of the warm season and drew visitors from surrounding counties. Eleanor's booth, strategically positioned near the central gazebo, had attracted steady crowds since the festival opened Friday afternoon. "I'll take the autumn leaves pattern," declared an elderly woman, running her fingers appreciatively over a quilt displayed on Eleanor's portable rack. "My grandson just bought a cabin up north. This will be perfect for those cool evenings." Eleanor smiled, carefully folding the quilt. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Harmon. I've reinforced the stitching on this one for extra durability." As she completed the sale, Eleanor glanced toward Max, who lay alert but relaxed beneath her display table. Over the past 2 weeks, she had developed a tentative routine, working at the shop during the day with Max as her constant companion, then spending nights at Judith's house. She'd returned home only twice to collect additional clothing, deliberately timing her visits when Jackson was likely to be out. The arrangement couldn't last forever, she knew. Eventually, she would need to confront the situation directly. But for now, the breathing space had allowed her to think clearly for the first time in months. "There's the town's quilt queen," boomed a familiar voice. Eleanor looked up to see Chief Donovan approaching, his police uniform freshly pressed for the festival. Despite his imposing height, the chief was known more for settling disputes with folksy wisdom than wielding authority. "Chief," she greeted him warmly. "How's the festival security detail?" "Oh, lost children, fender benders in the parking area, and keeping the Walker brothers from spiking the lemonade." He chuckled, then lowered his voice. "No sign of your son today. Thought you might want to know." Eleanor's smile faltered. "Have you been watching for him?" "Just keeping an eye out, that's all." The chief shifted uncomfortably. "Robert mentioned there might be some family difficulties." Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm sure everything will sort itself out." Chief Donovan studied her face, his expression kind but knowing. "Eleanor, I've known you since high school. If you ever need to talk officially, file a report, request a protection order, my door's always open." "Thank you," she murmured, busying herself with straightening an already perfect display. After the chief moved on, Eleanor exhaled shakily. The idea that Jackson's behavior had become a matter of police awareness mortified her. She could almost hear her late husband's voice. "Family business stays in the family, Ellie." Around mid-afternoon, Max suddenly sat up, ears forward and body tense. Eleanor followed his gaze across the crowded square and felt her heart stutter. Jackson stood by the information booth, engaged in animated conversation with Tony Martinez, his gambling buddy. Even from a distance, Eleanor could tell from his gestures and flushed face that he'd been drinking. "Easy, Max," she murmured, though her own pulse had quickened. "Let's just stay calm." For a moment, it seemed Jackson might not notice her booth. Then, Tony pointed directly at her, and Jackson's head swiveled. His eyes locked with Eleanor's across the festival grounds, his expression darkening instantly. He began weaving through the crowd toward her booth, stopping occasionally to exchange forced pleasantries with townspeople who greeted him. Eleanor considered packing up early, but pride kept her rooted in place. This was her business, her community. She wouldn't be chased away. Max moved to stand beside her, his posture alert but controlled. Well, Jackson said as he reached the booth, his words slightly slurred. "The artist at work. Everyone's talking about Mom's amazing comeback." "Jackson," Eleanor acknowledged, acutely aware of curious glances from nearby vendors. "Are you enjoying the festival?" "Oh, immensely." He surveyed her display with exaggerated interest. "Quite the entrepreneur now, aren't you? I stopped by the house yesterday." Seems you've moved out without telling me. Eleanor kept her voice steady. I've been staying with a friend. I left you a note on the kitchen table. A note? He repeated, laughing without humor. Like I'm some roommate you're ghosting. Not your son who's going through a rough patch. Jackson, this isn't the place. No, it's perfect, he interrupted, his voice rising. Let's talk right here where everyone can see St. Eleanor and her delinquent son. Did you tell them all how you abandoned me? How you chose a stray dog over your own flesh and blood? Max growled softly, causing Jackson to take an instinctive step back. See, he pointed accusingly. That animal is dangerous. It's turned you against me. Eleanor noticed several festival-goers slowing to watch the confrontation. Judith, who had been browsing at a nearby booth, was now moving purposefully in their direction. Please lower your voice, Eleanor said quietly. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Jackson's laugh was bitter and loud. That's rich coming from you. The whole town thinks I'm abusing you or something. Did you tell them that? Did you make me the villain in your little story? You've done that yourself, Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. Your behavior, your choices, those aren't my responsibility anymore. Something dangerous flashed in Jackson's eyes. He leaned across the display table, knocking over a small stack of quilted pot holders. You think you can just cut me out? After everything I've sacrificed coming back to this pathetic town? His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. I know things about you, Mom. Things your church friends wouldn't appreciate. Like how you enabled Dad's drinking for years. How you looked the other way when he gambled away my college fund. Eleanor felt as if she'd been slapped. That's not true, isn't it? We all have secrets. Jackson straightened, a cruel smile playing on his lips. How much do you think your customers would pay if they knew their precious quilts were supporting a son you've abused and neglected? Maybe I should make an announcement right here. Before Eleanor could respond, Max moved with startling speed and precision. He didn't growl or bare his teeth. Instead, he simply placed himself directly between Jackson and Eleanor, then began to advance with deliberate steps, forcing Jackson to back away from the booth. Get that thing away from me, Jackson shouted, stumbling backward. Max is protecting me, Eleanor said, loud enough for bystanders to hear. He's never once hurt you, Jackson. He just won't let you hurt me either. The crowd had grown, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Judith had reached Eleanor's side, a steadying hand on her arm. Chief Donovan appeared at the edge of the gathering, assessing the situation with professional calm. This is ridiculous, Jackson spat, his face contorted with rage and embarrassment. You've turned the whole town against me. Your own son. No one is against you, Jackson, Eleanor said softly. But I can't help you anymore. Not the way you want. Not at the expense of my own safety and sanity. Safety. He nearly shouted the word. When have I ever? He cut himself off, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes watching. His gaze darted around the circle of faces, neighbors, childhood friends, former teachers, all witnessing his meltdown. Fine, he finally said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Have it your way, Mom. But remember, that house is half mine by right. Dad would have wanted it that way, and I'm not leaving it for some dog rescue fantasy of yours. With that, he turned and pushed his way through the crowd, ignoring the calls of his name from old acquaintances. Eleanor's legs finally gave way. She sank onto her chair, trembling with adrenaline and emotion. Max immediately returned to her side, pressing against her leg in silent support. Are you all right? Judith asked, kneeling beside her. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Around her, the festival crowd began to disperse, though many cast concerned glances in her direction. Chief Donovan approached, notepad in hand. Eleanor, I need to ask. Would you like to file a report about any of this? She shook her head. No, he didn't actually do anything this time. This time, the chief repeated meaningfully. If there have been other incidents. Please, Eleanor whispered. Not now. The chief nodded reluctantly. All right, but I'm having an officer drive by your house tonight, just as a precaution. And I want you to call immediately if anything happens. After he left, Judith helped Eleanor pack up her booth, though the festival would continue for several more hours. Neither spoke much. Words seemed inadequate after what had just transpired. As they loaded the last box into Judith's car, Eleanor finally broke the silence. I can't keep hiding, can I? Judith sighed. No, but you don't have to face this alone either. Eleanor gazed across the town square, where festival-goers had returned to their celebrations as if nothing had happened. Yet something fundamental had shifted, not just in her relationship with Jackson, but in her understanding of herself. "He's right about one thing," she said quietly, stroking Max's head. "I can't keep avoiding the house. It's time to go home." Max looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting a strength Eleanor was only beginning to rediscover in herself. Whatever came next, she would face it standing tall, not cowering in fear. For the first time in months, Eleanor Winters recognized the woman she used to be and caught a glimpse of who she might become. The evening air carried the scent of rain as Eleanor turned her key in the front door of her home. She paused on the threshold, Max alert beside her, both listening for any sound that might indicate Jackson's presence. The house stood silent and dim in the fading twilight. "Looks like we're alone," she murmured to Max, flipping on the entryway light. For now, at least. Eleanor moved through the rooms with growing unease. Nothing appeared obviously disturbed, yet something felt subtly wrong. Small items seemed out of place. Her reading glasses on the coffee table instead of the side table, cushions arranged differently on the sofa, her collection of family photos rearranged on the mantel. In the kitchen, she discovered evidence of Jackson's anger. A cabinet door hanging from one hinge, shards of her favorite teacup in the trash, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the counter. Eleanor sighed, running her hand along the wooden table where her family had gathered for decades. This house contained her entire history. How could she consider leaving it? "Let's check upstairs," she told Max, who had remained unusually vigilant, sniffing corners and doorways with focused intensity. Upstairs, Eleanor found her bedroom door ajar, though she distinctly remembered closing it before leaving. Heart pounding, she pushed it open. The room had been searched, dresser drawers partially open, bedding rumpled, the small jewelry box on her vanity left askew. What was he looking for? She wondered aloud. Max suddenly stiffened, his attention fixed on the closet. Eleanor followed his gaze, noticing the sliding door was open a few inches. With trembling fingers, she pulled it fully open. Her clothes hung undisturbed, but on the floor, the small safe where she kept important documents stood open and empty. "No," she whispered, dropping to her knees. The deed to the house, her will, insurance policies, all gone. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt of panic through her. From the window, she could see Jackson emerging from her car, movements unsteady as he slammed the door and staggered toward the house. "Max, quiet," she whispered, though the command was unnecessary. The dog had already shifted into a state of silent alertness, positioning himself between Eleanor and the bedroom door. She quickly dialed Judith's number, speaking in hushed tones. "He's here, and he's taken documents from my safe. The deed to the house, everything." "Get out now," Judith urged. "Go to a neighbor's. I'm calling Chief Donovan." "There's no time," Eleanor replied as the front door slammed below. "He's already inside." "Eleanor," Jackson's voice bellowed from downstairs. "I know you're here. Your friend Judith can't hide you forever." Eleanor ended the call, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Stay close," she murmured to Max, who followed her silently into the hallway. At the top of the stairs, she called down with a steadiness she didn't feel. "I'm here, Jackson. What have you done with my papers?" Jackson stood in the foyer, swaying slightly, a manila envelope clutched in one hand. His eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, narrowed at the sight of Max beside her. "Still got your bodyguard, I see," he sneered. "The great protector. Where are my documents?" Eleanor repeated, descending the stairs slowly. Jackson patted the envelope. "Safe and sound. Just making some necessary adjustments to the family arrangements." His speech slurred slightly. "Did you know Dad left some interesting notes with his will? About how he always intended for the house to pass to me eventually?" Eleanor reached the bottom of the stairs, keeping a careful distance. "Your father did no such thing. The house is mine, free and clear. Well, the county records might show something different soon." His smile was ugly. "Amazing what you can do with the right signatures. Dad taught me how to forge yours years ago, for school permission slips, you know." "That's illegal, Jackson." He shrugged. "Only if someone catches you. And who would suspect a devoted son helping his aging mother with her finances?" He took a step toward her. "Face it, Mom. You're not equipped to manage all this on your own. Never have been." Max moved forward, a low rumble building in his chest. "Call off your attack, dog," Jackson snapped. "He's protecting me, not attacking you," Eleanor replied evenly. "There's a difference, one you've never understood." Something shifted in Jackson's expression, a flash of genuine hurt beneath the anger. "I came back because you needed me. The shop was closed, you were alone, getting older. I gave up everything in Chicago to help you. Is that what you've been telling yourself? That you came back for me?" Eleanor shook her head sadly. "You came back because you had nowhere else to go. Because gambling and alcohol had taken everything from you. Just like they did from your father." Jackson flinched as if struck. "Don't you dare compare me to him." "Why not? You've been following his path your whole adult life." Eleanor took a breath, forcing herself to continue despite the pain of old memories. "The difference is, I enabled your father's behavior. I made excuses, covered for him, pretended everything was fine until it nearly destroyed us all. I won't make that mistake again with you." "How noble," Jackson spat. "Too bad you didn't find your backbone 30 years ago. Might have saved Dad from drinking himself to death." The cruelty of the words hung in the air between them. Eleanor felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. "Your father made his choices, just as you're making yours," she said quietly. "I couldn't save him. And I can't save you either, not unless you want to be saved." Jackson laughed bitterly. "Save me? From what? From wanting what's rightfully mine? From expecting my own mother to support me during a rough patch? From becoming exactly what you claim to hate?" Eleanor replied. "Look at yourself, Jackson. Breaking into my safe, forging documents, threatening me in my own home. Who does that remind you of?" For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Jackson's face. Then his expression hardened again. "Doesn't matter," he muttered, waving the envelope. "Once these papers are filed, half this house is legally mine. Then we'll see who has the upper hand." The sound of car doors slamming outside drew their attention. Through the front window, Eleanor could see Chief Donovan's patrol car, with Judith's sedan pulling in behind it. "You called the cops on me?" Jackson's voice rose in disbelief. "Your own son?" "I called a friend who was concerned," Eleanor corrected. "Just like I called other friends when you gambled away your last chance in Chicago. Just like I called rehab centers when your drinking started affecting your work. I've been calling for help for you for years, Jackson. You've just never wanted to hear it." A sharp knock at the door was followed by the chief's voice. "Eleanor? Everything okay in there?" Before either could respond, Max suddenly darted forward, not toward Jackson but to a small ornamental box on the hallway table. With careful precision, he knocked it to the floor where it split open, revealing a hidden compartment. A small digital voice recorder tumbled out. Jackson stared at it in confusion. "What the hell?" Eleanor was equally bewildered. That's not mine." Max gently picked up the device in his mouth and brought it to Eleanor. As she took it, she accidentally pressed the playback button. Jackson's voice immediately filled the room. "Forged the deed. With your dementia, who would believe you anyway? I've already told half the town you're getting confused." Judith's voice came through the doorway as she stepped into the foyer. "That's one of several recordings, Jackson. Max has been trained to find and retrieve hidden devices. You'd be amazed what you can teach a former military service dog." Jackson's face drained of color. "You've been spying on me? In my own house?" After Eleanor showed signs of abuse, "Yes," Judith replied calmly. "As a former attorney specializing in elder abuse cases, I recognized the pattern immediately." Chief Donovan entered, taking in the scene with professional detachment. "Mr. Winters, I'll need that envelope you're holding." Jackson clutched it tighter. "This is family business, Chief. You have no right." "Actually, I do," Donovan interrupted. "Especially when there's evidence of document forgery and elder abuse." He held out his hand. "The envelope, please. Don't make this worse than it already is." For a moment, Eleanor thought Jackson might refuse, might escalate the situation further. Then, as if all the fight had suddenly drained from him, his shoulders slumped. He handed over the envelope without another word. As the chief examined the contents, Judith moved to Eleanor's side. "Are you all right?" Eleanor nodded numbly, watching her son's defeat with a complex mixture of relief and heartbreak. "How long have you been recording?" "Since the day at the crochet circle when I noticed your bruises," Judith admitted. "I've worked with too many victims to ignore the signs. And Max has been more than just protection. He's been gathering evidence." Eleanor looked down at Max in astonishment. The dog sat calmly at her side, his mission apparently completed. Is that why he was discharged from military service? She asked. Being too protective was actually about his ability to find surveillance equipment. Judith smiled slightly. Max was a specialized search dog. When I recognized his training behaviors, I contacted his former handler. He was never aggressive, just exceptionally good at his job. Too good, sometimes, which made him unsuitable for certain missions. Chief Donovan cleared his throat. Jackson Winters, I'm placing you under arrest for forgery, attempted property fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. As the chief recited the Miranda rights, Eleanor watched her son's face. The child she had raised, the man he had become, the wreckage of potential and love. Despite everything, her heart ached for him. Wait, she said suddenly. Is there an alternative? A program or something? The chief paused. What are you asking, Eleanor? I don't want him in jail. I want him to get help. She met Jackson's surprised gaze. Real help this time. For the gambling, the drinking, the anger, all of it. There's a court-mandated treatment program, Judith offered, combined with community service and restitution. But it would be up to the judge, and Jackson would have to agree. I won't press charges, Eleanor said firmly, if he agrees to complete the program. Jackson stared at her, confusion and the first flickers of shame crossing his face. Why would you do that? After everything. Because you're my son, Eleanor replied simply. And because I failed you once before by enabling your father instead of helping him face his demons. I won't make that mistake again. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Eleanor saw a genuine emotion break through Jackson's careful facade. Not anger or manipulation, but raw, unfiltered vulnerability. I don't deserve it, he whispered. No, Eleanor agreed. You don't, but you're going to earn it, starting now. As Chief Donovan led Jackson outside to discuss the potential arrangement, Eleanor felt a strange lightness spreading through her chest. Not happiness exactly. There was too much pain and too long a road ahead for that. But something equally powerful, hope. Max pressed against her leg, and she bent to embrace him, burying her face in his fur. How did you know? She whispered. How did you find exactly what we needed? Judith smiled, watching them. Some things can't be explained, but I'd say you two were meant to rescue each other. Through the open door, Eleanor could see the lights of neighboring houses glowing softly in the gathering dusk. Beyond them lay Mapleton, the town that had witnessed her shame and her strength, her fall and her rise. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. Summer descended on Mapleton with blinding sunshine and thick, honeyed air that clung to skin and slowed the pace of life to a languid crawl. Eleanor's garden flourished under her renewed attention. Tomato plants heavy with fruit, zinnias and black-eyed Susans creating a riot of color, and herbs sending their fragrance into the air with each passing breeze. On this particular Saturday morning, she knelt in the soft earth, hands protected by worn gardening gloves as she carefully weeded around her prized rose bushes. Max lay in a patch of shade nearby, his vigilant eyes following her movements while occasionally scanning the peaceful backyard. Though his protective instincts remained intact, he had gradually relaxed over the past month as the household tension dissipated. The sound of the back door opening drew both their attention. Jackson emerged, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. He moved with a careful deliberateness that spoke of his 3 weeks of sobriety, still uncomfortable in his own skin, but trying to inhabit it more honestly. Thought you might be thirsty, he said, offering a glass to Eleanor. It's already 85 degrees, and it's not even noon. Thank you. She accepted the drink, noting how he maintained a respectful distance, no longer invading her space as he once had. The heat doesn't bother me much. After 68 winters, I've learned to appreciate every summer day. Jackson nodded, then gestured to the garden. It's looking good. Dad would have been impressed. Eleanor smiled faintly. Your father never noticed the garden unless something died, but he would have loved seeing the workshop you've set up in the garage. An awkward silence settled between them, not hostile as before, but weighted with all that remained unspoken. Since the night of Jackson's arrest, their relationship had entered unfamiliar territory. The court-mandated treatment program required Jackson to attend daily AA meetings, weekly gambling addiction therapy, and anger management sessions. He had moved into the garage apartment, giving both of them necessary space while he worked through the program. So, Jackson finally said, "Today's your big event at the shop, right? The launch thing. The animal welfare fundraiser," Eleanor confirmed. "Judith helped me organize it. We're donating 10% of all sales to the county shelter." That's really great, Mom." Jackson shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Would it be okay if I stopped by? I mean, I understand if you'd rather I didn't. After what happened at the festival, I'd like that." Eleanor interrupted gently. "Max would too, I think." At the sound of his name, Max's ears perked up. He had maintained a careful neutrality toward Jackson these past weeks. Not hostile, but not especially friendly either, as if reserving judgment until the man proved his intentions. Jackson glanced at the dog with an uncertain smile. "We're working on our relationship, aren't we, buddy?" He turned back to Eleanor. "My therapist says I need to make amends to everyone I've hurt. That includes Max. Apparently, animals can sense sincerity better than people sometimes." Eleanor nodded, touched by this evidence of genuine effort. "They can sense a lot of things we miss. I believe Max knew what he was doing from the moment I found him." "Or he found you," Jackson suggested. After a moment, he added, "Look, Mom, I've been wanting to ask, how did you end up with him exactly? I mean, I know Marilyn brought him to you during that winter storm, but the chances of a trained military dog just happening to cross your path." Eleanor had wondered the same thing. Judith has a theory about that. Apparently, Max escaped from a transport vehicle during a snowstorm about 50 miles from here. He was being transferred to a specialized training facility when the accident happened. They searched for weeks but assumed he hadn't survived the extreme temperatures. So he was lost for, what, 2 months before you found him? Jackson shook his head in disbelief. "Judith thinks he may have been watching our house for days before Marilyn found him," Eleanor continued. "His former handler said he was trained to identify vulnerable individuals who needed protection." Jackson's expression sobered. "And he found you. Because of me." Eleanor met her son's gaze steadily. "We found each other. That's what matters." The clock in the kitchen chimed 11, breaking the moment. Eleanor rose from her gardening, brushing soil from her knees. "I should get ready for the fundraiser. The shop opens at noon. Right? I'll, see you there then." Jackson backed away, then paused. "Mom, I really am trying. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but I need you to know that." Eleanor smiled gently. "I know, Jackson. One day at a time, remember?" 2 hours later, winter's warmth buzzed with activity. The small shop had been transformed for the animal welfare fundraiser. Special displays featured pet-themed quilts and accessories. Photographs of shelter animals adorned the walls, and a refreshment table offered cookies shaped like dog bones and cat paws. Eleanor moved through the crowd, greeting customers and answering questions with a confidence she had rediscovered over these past months. Max followed at her side, wearing a special bandana Eleanor had quilted for the occasion, blue fabric emblazoned with Rescue Ambassador in gold thread. "Eleanor, this is wonderful," exclaimed Martha Jenkins, examining a cat-patterned quilt. "And such a creative way to support the shelter." "It was Judith's idea initially," Eleanor admitted, "but it grew from there. The shelter needs a new transport van, and every little bit helps." As she continued chatting with Martha, Eleanor caught sight of Jackson entering the shop. He hesitated in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable with the crowd, many of whom had witnessed his public meltdown at the festival. A few people glanced his way with undisguised wariness. Eleanor excused herself from Martha and made her way to her son's side. "I'm glad you came," she said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Jackson managed a tight smile. "Place looks great. Busy too. Would you help me bring out some more refreshments from the back?" she asked, offering him both a task and an escape from the curious stares. In the small storage room, Jackson relaxed visibly. "Thanks for the rescue. I forgot how much this town loves to stare. They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." Eleanor handed him a tray of cookies. Small towns have short attention spans for old news. "Is that what I am now? Old news?" There was no bitterness in his tone, only thoughtful curiosity. "You're becoming a new story," Eleanor replied. "That's what recovery is about, isn't it? Writing a different ending." Jackson nodded slowly. "My sponsor says something similar. Says I need to imagine a future that doesn't revolve around the next bet or the next drink." He paused. "I've been thinking about what that might look like. For me, I mean." Before Eleanor could respond, Judith appeared in the doorway. "There you are?" "Eleanor, You need to come see this. Someone very special just arrived. Puzzled, Eleanor followed Judith back into the main shop area with Jackson trailing behind. Near the front counter stood a tall man in his 50s wearing an Army veteran's cap. The moment Max spotted him, the dog's entire demeanor changed. He let out a soft whine and moved forward with barely contained excitement. "Sergeant Maxwell," the man said, kneeling to greet the dog with obvious emotion. "I never thought I'd see you again, buddy." "Eleanor, this is Captain James Reeves," Judith introduced, Max's former handler. "When I contacted him about Max's recovery, he asked to be updated. I thought today's event would be the perfect opportunity for a reunion." Captain Reeves stood, extending his hand to Eleanor. "Mrs. Winters, I can't thank you enough for saving him. We searched for weeks after the transport accident. He saved me," Eleanor replied honestly. "In more ways than I can explain." The captain nodded understanding. That's what he was trained to do. Maxwell was part of a specialized unit that matched service dogs with veterans suffering from PTSD and domestic violence survivors. He was actually en route to a new training facility when the accident happened. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm day. He was being trained to help people in abusive situations? Not just trained, he was one of our best, especially gifted at detecting rising tensions and intervening before situations escalated. Captain Reeves smiled fondly at Max. "Some dogs just have a sixth sense for when someone needs protection. Maxwell here could assess a threat level better than most humans." As the captain continued explaining Max's background, Eleanor noticed Jackson had stepped back, his expression troubled. She moved to his side, speaking quietly. "Are you all right?" He shook his head slightly. Hearing it like that, how Max was specially trained to protect people from someone like me. It makes it real in a different way. "Jackson, no, it's good," he interrupted. "Part of recovery is facing the truth, right? I was the threat Max was protecting you from. That's not easy to hear, but I need to hear it." Eleanor studied her son's face, the genuine pain there, but also the clarity that had been absent during his months of addiction and anger. "What will happen to Max now?" Jackson asked suddenly. "Will his handler want him back?" The question sent a spike of fear through Eleanor. She had not considered this possibility. As if sensing her distress, Captain Reeves approached them. "Mrs. Winters, I want to assure you that Max has found his forever home with you. After a service dog forms a bond like this, we never separate them. Besides," he added with a smile, "he's technically retired now." Relief flooded through Eleanor. "Thank you. I don't think I could bear to lose him." "Actually," the captain continued, "I have a proposition for you both. Our program is always looking for success stories to help train new service dogs. Maxwell's experience with you, finding you, protecting you, even gathering evidence, is exactly the kind of outcome we hope for. Would you consider allowing him to visit our training center occasionally? Perhaps even sharing your story with our team?" Eleanor glanced at Jackson, surprised when he spoke up. "I'd be willing to participate too," he said quietly. "If hearing about my behavior, my addiction, my anger, could help train dogs to protect other people, maybe some good could come from all this." Captain Reeves regarded him with newfound respect. "That's an incredibly valuable offer, Mr. Winters. The perspective of someone who's recognized and addressed these behaviors would be invaluable to our program." As the conversation continued, Eleanor watched Max circulating through the shop, receiving admiration from customers while never straying far from her. Something the captain had said resonated deeply about Max having a sixth sense for those who needed protection. Eleanor thought about that snowy February night when Max had come into her life, cold, injured, and as much in need of saving as she was. Perhaps that was the true nature of rescue. Not one-directional salvation, but a mutual recognition of need and the courage to answer it. By late afternoon, the fundraiser had exceeded all expectations. The final customers departed with purchases tucked under their arms, leaving Eleanor, Judith, Jackson, and Captain Reeves to tally the day's success. "Over $2,000 for the shelter," Judith announced triumphantly. "And nearly double your usual Saturday sales, Eleanor. Plus 6 adoption applications for shelter animals," added the captain, holding up the forms. "I'd call that a remarkable outcome." Eleanor nodded in agreement, but her mind was already racing with new possibilities. The day's events had crystallized something that had been forming in her thoughts for weeks. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about expanding. Not just the shop, but its purpose. The others looked at her expectantly. What if winter's warmth became something more? A place that supports both animal welfare and domestic abuse awareness? We could create a safe space for people to learn about resources while supporting a cause that doesn't raise suspicion or stigma. A cover for getting help, Judith murmured thoughtfully. Brilliant. It would need more space. Eleanor continued, warming to her vision. Somewhere for support groups to meet privately, perhaps. And maybe a corner where therapy dogs in training could socialize with the public. Captain Reeves nodded enthusiastically. The program would definitely support something like that. We could even provide training workshops. As they discussed the possibilities, Eleanor noticed Jackson standing slightly apart, listening intently but not participating. She moved to his side. What do you think? She asked. He seemed surprised to be consulted. I think it's incredible, he said honestly. Taking something painful and creating something that could help others. He hesitated. Mom, I've been meaning to tell you. I've applied for a position at the community college, teaching business fundamentals. It's part-time, but it's a start. Pride swelled in Eleanor's chest. That's wonderful, Jackson. When do you hear back? Actually, I got the call yesterday. A small, genuine smile lifted his features. I start next month. It doesn't pay much, but I'll be able to move into my own place before winter. A complex mixture of emotions filled Eleanor. Happiness for his progress, relief at the thought of having her home truly to herself again, and a touch of maternal worry that never quite disappears, no matter a child's age. You'll do wonderfully, she said, squeezing his arm gently. And you know you always have a home here if you need it. A real home, not what we had before. Jackson nodded, blinking away unexpected moisture in his eyes. Thanks, Mom, for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Eleanor found herself standing in the center of her small shop, taking in the space that had become so much more than a business. Max sat beside her, his steady presence a reminder of how much had changed in 6 short months. Captain Reeves approached to say goodbye. You know, he said thoughtfully, in the military, we had a saying about working dogs like Max. We humans think we're the ones doing the rescuing, but more often than not, it's the other way around. Eleanor smiled, resting her hand on Max's head. I think you're right about that, Captain. More right than you know. As she locked up the shop and walked toward Judith's waiting car, Eleanor felt the weight of the past year, all its pain and fear, but also its unexpected gifts. Ahead lay an uncertain future, but for the first time in decades, uncertainty felt less like a threat and more like possibility. Max trotted beside her, alert and attentive as always, but with a new lightness to his step that mirrored her own. Together, they moved forward into the gathering twilight, rescuer and rescued, each having saved the other in ways that defied simple explanation. 1 year to the day after Max had appeared on Eleanor's doorstep during that bitter February storm, Mapleton awoke to a similar blanket of white. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes, transforming the town into a winter wonderland that glittered under streetlights in the pre-dawn darkness. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, watching the familiar scene with a cup of steaming tea warming her hands. What do you think, Max? Should we brave the weather for our morning walk, or stay in where it's warm? She asked, glancing down at her faithful companion. Max's response was immediate, a soft woof and eager movement toward the back door where his leash hung on a custom-made hook. Eleanor laughed, setting down her mug. I should have known better than to ask. You never turn down a walk, do you? Not even in a snowstorm. As she bundled up in her winter coat, scarf, and gloves, Eleanor caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman who gazed back at her seemed decades younger than the fearful, diminished person she had been a year ago. Her silver hair was styled in a flattering modern cut, her posture straight and confident, her eyes clear and purposeful. Quite a difference a year makes, she murmured, adjusting her scarf. Outside, the snow crunched pleasantly beneath their feet as they made their way down the quiet street. The neighborhood was just beginning to stir, lights appearing in windows, the occasional sound of a snowblower in the distance. Max trotted happily beside her, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air, his dark coat dusted with snowflakes. Their route took them past familiar landmarks, the park where they'd first established their walking routine, the coffee shop that had become a regular stop when the weather permitted outdoor seating, and finally, Main Street. where strings of white lights still twinkled from the holiday season, casting a magical glow over the snow-covered sidewalks. As they approached winter's warmth, or rather, what had once been winter's warmth, Eleanor paused to take in the transformation. The small storefront had expanded to include the adjacent space, doubling its size. A new sign hung above the entrance: Second Chances, Quilts and Companions. Below it, in smaller lettering, a partnership for people and pets. Eleanor felt a surge of pride as she gazed at the colorful window display showcasing handmade quilts alongside photographs of adopted animals and their new families. The ambitious vision she had shared after the fundraiser had become reality faster than anyone expected, thanks to an anonymous donation that had arrived mysteriously in October, enough to secure the lease on the neighboring space and fund the renovations. "Mrs. Winters." "Good morning," called a cheerful voice. Eleanor turned to see Lisa Chun, a recent college graduate who managed the shop 3 days a week, approaching with a cardboard tray of coffee cups. "I didn't expect to see you so early," Lisa said, carefully navigating the snowy sidewalk. "Especially in this weather. Max insists on his routine, snow or shine." Eleanor replied with a smile. "I thought I'd check on things before the volunteer meeting this afternoon." "Everything's ready," Lisa assured her, unlocking the shop door. "The new therapy dog corner is set up, and the community room is prepared for both the support group at 10 and the quilting class at 2. They stepped inside, and Max immediately shook off the snow before padding to his designated spot, a comfortable bed position to allow him a full view of the shop floor. Though officially retired from service work, he still took his unofficial role as shop guardian seriously. Eleanor had just removed her coat when the bell above the door chimed. Captain Reeves entered, stamping snow from his boots. "Morning, Eleanor, Lisa," he greeted them warmly. "Thought I'd stop by before heading to the training center. The recruits are coming today." Eleanor smiled. "Perfect timing. I just finished the demonstration quilts for the sensory training." Since their partnership had begun, Eleanor had developed specialized quilts with various textures and hidden compartments that helped train service dogs to assist with tasks ranging from anxiety management to evidence collection. Her designs had proven so effective that Captain Reeves' program now ordered them regularly. "How many dogs in this class?" she asked, pouring him a cup of coffee from the pot Lisa had started. "6, he replied, "including 2 rescues that show exceptional aptitude. One of them reminds me of Max, same focused intelligence." He glanced fondly at the German Shepherd, who had perked up at the mention of his name. "Speaking of the program," Captain Reeves continued, "I received the evaluations from Jackson's presentation last month. Overwhelmingly positive. His perspective on addiction, anger, and recovery really resonated with the trainees." Pride warmed Eleanor's chest. "He's found his calling, I think. The combination of teaching at the college and speaking about his experiences seems to fulfill him in a way nothing else has." Jackson's transformation over the past year had been remarkable. After completing the court-mandated treatment program, he had voluntarily continued with therapy and AA meetings. His part-time teaching position had recently expanded to full-time, and he had moved into a small apartment near the college campus. Their relationship, while still healing, had found a new foundation of mutual respect and honest communication. "Will he be at the anniversary celebration tonight?" Captain Reeves asked. Eleanor nodded. "He's coming directly from campus. He's been helping Judith coordinate the speakers." The bell chimed again as Judith herself entered, carrying a large portfolio case. "Perfect timing," she announced, brushing snow from her silver hair. "I've just picked up the final prints for the exhibition." The anniversary celebration planned for that evening would feature a photography exhibition documenting the journey of second chances from concept to reality. More importantly, it would showcase success stories, animals rescued, people helped, and the unique partnership that had grown between Eleanor's quilting expertise and the service dog program. "Let's see them," Eleanor said eagerly. Judith opened the portfolio on the counter, carefully removing mounted photographs. "The printer did a beautiful job. Look at this one." The image showed Eleanor and Max sitting on a bench in the town square, sunlight filtering through leaves to create a dappled pattern across them both. In the photograph, Eleanor was looking down at Max with an expression of such profound gratitude and love that it caught in her throat even now. "That's the cover of the program," Judith explained. and this series will hang in the community room. She spread out several more photographs. Max with therapy dogs in training, Eleanor teaching quilting to a support group for domestic violence survivors, and a particularly moving image of Jackson speaking to a group of veterans about recovery. "These are wonderful," Eleanor said softly. "They tell the whole story." "Not quite the whole story," Judith replied with a mysterious smile. "There's one more surprise for tonight. The mayor is making a special announcement." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "What kind of announcement?" "Let's just say Mapleton is recognizing a very special canine citizen," Judith answered, winking at Max, complete with an official ceremony. As the morning progressed, the shop filled with the usual Saturday bustle. Customers browsing quilts, volunteers preparing for the afternoon support group, and a steady stream of well-wishers dropping by with cards and small gifts to mark the anniversary. Through it all, Eleanor moved with easy confidence, a far cry from the frightened woman who had hidden bruises beneath scarves and excuses a year earlier. Around noon, the door opened to reveal a hesitant young woman clutching a sleeping toddler. Her eyes darted nervously around the shop, and a fading bruise was visible on her cheekbone. Lisa immediately approached her with a warm smile. "Welcome to Second Chances. Can I help you find something?" The woman shifted her child to her other hip. I heard there were people here who might understand." Her voice trailed off uncertainly. Eleanor stepped forward. "You heard correctly," she said gently. "Why don't we talk in the community room? It's quieter there." As she led the woman toward the back of the shop, Max rose from his bed and followed at a respectful distance. Eleanor had learned that his presence often provided comfort to those in distress, his calm demeanor radiating a sense of safety. "I don't know why I came," the woman whispered once they were seated in the private room. "My sister mentioned this place. Said it helped a friend of hers." "You're very brave to be here," Eleanor told her. "The first step is always the hardest." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "He's not always like this," she began, the familiar refrain Eleanor had once spoken herself. "When he's not drinking, he's wonderful with Tommy. But lately, you don't have to explain," Eleanor said, reaching out to lightly touch the woman's hand. "We understand. Everyone here does." For the next hour, Eleanor listened as the young mother's story unfolded, a narrative so achingly similar to her own that it could have been an echo across time. When appropriate, she shared parts of her own experience, offering not just sympathy but practical advice, and, most importantly, hope. By the time they rejoined the main shop area, the woman, Jessica, Eleanor had learned, stood straighter, a resource packet clutched in her free hand, and a fragile determination in her eyes. "Will you be at the community dinner on Thursday?" Eleanor asked. "No pressure, but it's a good way to meet others who understand." Jessica nodded. "I think I will. Thank you for seeing me." "That's what we do here," Eleanor replied simply. "We see each other." After Jessica left, Judith approached with a knowing look. "Another one finding her way?" Eleanor nodded. "She reminds me so much of myself. Except she's seeking help sooner." "That's progress." "That's your influence," Judith corrected. "This safe space you've created, it makes it possible for people to ask for help without shame." As afternoon faded into early evening, Eleanor returned home to prepare for the anniversary celebration. Max accompanied her up the stairs to her bedroom, where a new outfit hung waiting on the closet door, a tailored pantsuit in deep blue that Eleanor had splurged on for the occasion. "What do you think, Max? Too fancy for an old quilter?" she asked, holding the garment against herself. Max tilted his head appraisingly, then gave a definitive bark of approval. Eleanor laughed. "I'll take that as a yes. Now, you have your own new attire to wear." She opened a dresser drawer and removed a handcrafted collar and matching bandana. The leather collar featured intricate tooling and a small silver medallion engraved with Max's name, while the bandana showcased Eleanor's finest quilting work, a design incorporating elements from all the seasons they had weathered together. As she dressed, Eleanor's thoughts drifted back to the frightened, isolated woman she had been when Max first entered her life, hiding bruises, making excuses, shrinking herself to avoid conflict. The transformation still amazed her sometimes, like waking from a long, dark dream into unexpected sunlight. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Max hurried ahead of her, his nails clicking on the hardwood floors. When Eleanor opened the door, Jackson stood on the porch, looking handsome in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie. Your chariot awaits, he said with a smile, gesturing to his car in the driveway. Judith insisted I pick you up. Something about making a proper entrance. You look very distinguished, Professor Winters, Eleanor teased, using the title his students had bestowed on him. Jackson chuckled. And you look beautiful, Mom. Really beautiful. As they drove through the snowy evening toward the town hall where the celebration would be held, Eleanor gazed out at the familiar streets transformed by winter. Last February, these same roads had seemed like barriers, trapping her in a situation that felt inescapable. Now, they were simply pathways connecting one part of her life to another. Nervous about your speech? Jackson asked, interrupting her reverie. Eleanor shook her head. Not really. When you've lived through what we have, talking about it seems simple enough. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. I was terrified the first time I spoke publicly about my addiction and what it did to us. But afterwards, this Vietnam vet came up to me. Tough as nails, you know the type. And he had tears in his eyes. Said hearing me admit what I'd done gave him the courage to face his own demons. That's why we do it, Eleanor said softly. Not just for ourselves, but for the Jessicas and the veterans and everyone else who needs to know they're not alone. When they arrived at the town hall, Eleanor was astonished by the transformation. The usually austere municipal building had been decorated with twinkling lights, displays of Eleanor's quilts, and large photographs documenting the evolution of second chances. A red carpet led from the entrance to the main hall, where at least 100 people had already gathered. There she is, Mayor Wilson called as Eleanor entered with Max and Jackson. Our guest of honor. The crowd erupted in applause, causing Eleanor to blush. Max, however, accepted the attention with dignified composure, his new collar and bandana gleaming under the lights. The evening unfolded like a dream. Speeches celebrating the impact of second chances, testimonials from those who had been helped by the program, and a moving video presentation featuring before and after footage of rescued animals alongside interviews with their adoptive families. When it came time for Eleanor to speak, she approached the podium with Max at her side, drawing strength from his steady presence as she had so many times before. 1 year ago, she began. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, too ashamed to ask for help, too frightened to imagine a different life. Then a half-frozen German Shepherd showed up on my doorstep during the worst storm of the year. She paused, looking down at Max with a smile. Most people would say I rescued him that night. The truth is, we rescued each other. Max gave me the courage to reclaim my life, while I gave him a home where his protective instincts were valued rather than feared. That mutual salvation is the foundation of everything we've built with second chances. As Eleanor continued her speech, she caught glimpses of familiar faces in the audience. Judith beaming with pride, Captain Reeves nodding in agreement, Chief Donovan smiling broadly. In the front row sat Jackson, his expression a complex mixture of pride and lingering regret. Recovery isn't linear, Eleanor continued, meeting her son's gaze. It's a journey with setbacks and victories, dark days and moments of unexpected joy. Second chances isn't just about rescuing animals or helping people escape abusive situations. It's about believing that transformation is possible, even when it seems hopeless. After the applause died down, Mayor Wilson approached the podium with an official-looking document and a small velvet box. As mayor of Mapleton, he announced, it gives me great pleasure to present the first ever Canine Citizen Medal to Max Winters, whose extraordinary service to our community has transcended the bounds of ordinary animal companionship. The crowd cheered as the mayor carefully draped the medal around Max's neck. The dog sat perfectly still, as if understanding the significance of the moment. Furthermore, Mayor Wilson continued, I am proud to proclaim February 15th as Second Chances Day in Mapleton, in honor of the day that brought together an extraordinary dog and an equally extraordinary woman, changing not just their lives, but our entire community. As the celebration wound down and people began to depart, Eleanor found herself standing in the quiet corner of the hall, observing the scene with a sense of peaceful accomplishment. Jackson approached, handing her a cup of punch. Quite a legacy you've built, Mom, he said. Dad would have been proud. Eleanor considered this. I think he would have been, yes. But more importantly, I'm proud of what we've created here, and of you, Jackson. He ducked his head slightly. I'm still working on deserving that pride. That's what makes me proudest of all, she replied softly. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor caught sight of Jessica from earlier that day, standing hesitantly near the exit with her toddler asleep on her shoulder. Eleanor excused herself and crossed to the young woman. "I'm so glad you came," she said warmly. Jessica smiled shyly. "Your story gave me courage. If you could start over at 68, maybe I can at 28. "You absolutely can," Eleanor assured her. "And you won't be doing it alone." Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the town blanketed in pristine white that reflected the moonlight. Eleanor, Jackson, and Max walked slowly toward the car, their footprints marking a path through the untouched snow. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor remarked, looking up at the star-filled sky. "Like the whole world has been made new." Max pressed against her leg, his warm presence a constant reminder of the bond that had changed everything. The metal gleamed at his throat, catching the moonlight as he surveyed his domain with quiet dignity. As they drove home through the silent streets of Mapleton, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, from fear to freedom, from isolation to community, from despair to hope. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but they would face them together, step by step, day by day. Back home, Eleanor stood on her porch for a moment before entering, breathing in the cold, clean air and looking up at the house that had once felt like a prison and now truly felt like a home again. Max waited patiently at her side, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid night. "Well, Max," she said softly, "we've come full circle, haven't we? 1 year since you found me, and look how far we've come." Max looked up at her, his amber eyes reflecting the porch light, wise and knowing as always. Then he turned toward the door, glancing back as if to say it was time to go inside, time to rest before tomorrow's new adventures. Eleanor smiled, following him into the warmth of her home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others find their way out of darkness. But tonight, in this quiet moment of completion and beginning, she would simply be grateful for the unexpected gift of a second chance, and for the remarkable dog who had made it all possible. "You're right, Max," she whispered as she closed the door behind them. "This isn't the end of our story. It's just the beginning." Dale like, suscribite al canal, activa la campanita y si has visto hasta aquí, comenta he visto hasta aquí, y deja tu opinión sobre esta historia. Y no te olvides de ver el próximo video que aparece en la pantalla final, que está muy emocionante.